Hi guys, it's TM06 doing another PvP video with TM44Lava. So let's go on about the Halloween event before we go into it. The Halloween event ends on Thursday. So the plan is to do an overall video and get another video out Thursday. I know it's been delayed, but it is coming. So in this video, we're going to talk about our Ferocious Cup. We're going to go through with Nigel, see what his advice is like, and basically what to do and not to do. When it comes to a new cup, I know nothing, okay? I know nothing. And I need to learn from him, okay? He is my guide, and he's always been my guide. He's gonna give you advice, tips, and pointers of what you should be doing and should be avoiding, all right? I don't know what to expect because, I haven't learned it, so you're gonna be on a journey with me, okay? We're gonna learn together, all right? So yeah, hope you enjoy the video, and wish us luck.
Okay, so this is the process of me teaching Rav the Ferocious Meta. Okay, so that is what the video is going to be about. I'm going to split the video into 3 different sections. Number 1, we're going to be me explaining the meta to him. We're going to then move on to part 2, which is going to be a couple of strategies that I've come up with whilst looking at the meta. And then part 3 is just going to be us looking at those strategies and doing a couple games, a couple practice matches to see how it goes from there. Okay, so obviously we're just going to be defining the meta of the Ferocious Cup. Now the issue is that the Ferocious Cup happens to be the first one that we're doing this with, and it's probably the most complicated one. Now the reason for that is probably because it's not been designed with any typings in mind. It's more been designed about being an animal or not, and as a result the meta is very, very complicated. Okay, so we're just going to start off with the main guys. The number 1 ranked one, which is obviously Umbreon. Umbreon is obviously the number 1 Pokemon in this cup. It's absolutely amazing and is fantastic if you have Last Resort, or even if you don't have Last Resort. A good substitute, if you didn't have Last Resort, is Alolan Raticate. So I'll put those 2 in their own little thing. So we're just going to be talking about Umbreon to start with and his meta, etc. So obviously, Umbreon and Alolan Raticate only really hard lose to the charm user.
So talk to me about the Dolphin. What's the Dolphin's purpose?
That's a very good question. So Donphan I put on there as part of a charm user because technically he can learn charm. So it's a really weird one. So obviously if you see a Donphan on someone's team, they could be using counter, they could be using charm. I put it there as like a little mini one. I would imagine not many people are going to be using it as a charm user. The main charm user is obviously going to be Alolan Ninetales, Gramble. You've also got Delcatty. There's a few more in there that I haven't included in this thing. And then you've obviously got the people that beat the charm users. So they are going to be poison types. You've got the Alolan Marowak because he's fire, so he resists the charm. There's a few more, right? So you've obviously also got Larion because he resists charm as well. And obviously the main thing about this is the fact that it's a rock, paper, scissors because Umbreon and Alolan Raticate beat the anti-charmers, right? So this is what I'm going to describe as the Umbreon meta, because this is basically all about Umbreon. Now the weird thing about this is that you could probably have a full cup based on just this meta. You can have like multiple games are going to be just about this meta. But the interesting thing about this cup is that that's not everything about it, okay? So we're just going to quickly have a quick look at each of these categories, and then we'll move on to the other stuff. These 2, right? The first main category that we talked about. We've got Umbreon, Alolan Raticate. As I said before, Alolan Raticate is a nice substitute if you don't happen to have a Last Resort Umbreon. And actually, Alolan Raticate beats Umbreon if you don't have Last Resort. If you've only got Dark moves, then it's quite interesting. Alolan Raticate actually wins the matchup. But if you have Last Resort, then Umbreon is actually the best choice.
What's the best moveset to use on Alolan Raticate?
Good question. You want the normal move, so it's Quick Attack, Hyper Fang, and Crunch. Okay. Right? So obviously Hyper Fang is basically your Last Resort substitute and is non-legacy. So you have that normal move.
So let's say, obviously, for example, myself, I don't have a Last Resort Umbreon.
Yeah.
Would you advise me to put a Alolan Raticate over an Umbreon for that reason?
That very much depends on the rest of your team. If you're happy taking down a lot of the other Umbreons and taking down all the other stuff, then there's nothing wrong with going into the Umbreon with 2 Dark moves. He's still a phenomenal Pokemon. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But you do want to counteract that and make sure you have other things that counter Umbreon or counter, for example, stuff like Skunk Tank. We'll be talking about that in a little bit, okay? So yeah, they're the main 2. Generally, you're going to see a lot of people using Umbreon. Alolan Raticate's not a bad substitute though, okay? You've got the fairy users, the main one being Alolan Ninetales. It's the highest ranked one on TV Poke. For a reason, it's absolutely fantastic Pokemon. And generally beats the other charm users as well. And you've got the anti-charm users, right? The other thing. Personally, my favorite one that I've been using so far is Alolan Marowak. I think Alolan Marowak is a fantastic Pokemon. It can really farm down Alolan Ninetales, right, being the #1 charm user. because it resists the charm and is also doing super effective damage against it because it's ice. Nidoking and Nidoqueen are going to be making a big appearance. Okay. Happy with that so far?
That's fair, yeah.
Cool,
yeah.
so we've got, that is the Umbreon meta. Also, Alolan Marowak beats the Nidos, which is quite interesting.
Question, does the Nidoking, if it has poison jab?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it only then a charm
Counter?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is an anti-charm counter if you have Fury Cutter or even Poison Jab.
Either or.
Either is fine.
Okay.
But if you have Poison Jab Nidoking, you might as well just use a Nidoqueen,
Okay.
to be honest. Nidoqueen is just like a better version of that. So you only really want to be using Nidoking if you have a legacy one.
Okay.
If it's Poison Jab, just use Nidoqueen instead.
Cool.
Yeah? Okay, so now the weird thing about this cup, like I said before, is that there is actually multiple metas going on within it. Right, yeah, so go on. So we are looking at now the other side of the coin, right? We've got the waters, right? So you've got Vaporeon, Bibarel, and Suicune. And obviously they're going to get beaten by the electrics, right? The cute little electrics over there.
Yeah, cuties.
And obviously then they're going to get beaten by these guys. So you can see these guys coming up again, which is why it's quite interesting. You've got the Nidoking, Nidoqueen, right, they're coming up. Donphan as well, mainly because it's ground, so it's resisting all the electric attacks, right? So all of those are resisting the electric attacks. Now, Alolan Marowak does beat a lot of the electric types because of his Bone Club. But actually, I haven't put him in there because it's not a hard counter. These ones really wall out those electrics.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm calling this stuff Vaporeon meta. Okay, so you can see there we've actually got two metas going on at the same time within this cup. It's a really weird thing happening. You've got this rock, paper, scissors, but two different versions of them happening at the exact same time in the cup. Just like the last one, you could probably have an entire cup based on this meta as well. I should have probably called this the Bibarel meta, because Bibarel is actually probably the best water type in the cup. But I just hate Vaporeon. I think he looks so stupid. So I refuse to use him. And I prefer to score a Vaporeon because Vaporeon's a gangster. And the other one's called Umbreon, so I thought it'd be a little nice little parallel. So you got obviously the waters there. As I said before, the number one water being Bibarel. Really, really good Pokemon. Personally, I'm not going to use it because he looks so goofy. Stupid little guy. I'm going to be using Vaporeon because I have a last resort one. Want a bit of a flex on it. But there we go. All three are good choices. Suicune's a bit of a weird one because his fast attack is not Water Gun, right? His fast attack is actually Snarl, which, as we know, Snarl's been buffed recently, gains a lot of energy. It's really good stuff, but it doesn't do that constant damage that you want from the waters. Vaporeon and Bibarel both have that Water Gun, that constant damage, so it's quite nice.
So would these be like more advisable than him, Suicune?
Yes, I would advise personally either Vaporeon or Bibarel.
Okay.
Personally advise Vaporeon so you can avoid this goofy guy.
Okay. I need to try this goofy guy out.
Yeah, he's good. He's very good.
I've not tried him out.
And then you've obviously got the electrics. Now, these are, in my opinion, the worst thing of the cup.
Okay.
They are all absolute glass cannons. They have no health, and they lose to a lot of matchups.
Okay.
They even sometimes lose to some water matchups because they don't resist any water attacks, and depending on shields, you can sometimes lose those, which sucks. But yes, the main reason for them is to beat the waters.
Is it imperative to have one of these?
I personally think it is, and I think it's good to have it on your team just to scare them so they can't always start Vaporeon and feel safe. But there are other options as well. We'll be talking about those like Linoon, etc. like that. We'll be talking about why in a second there, okay? Of those, though, it is actually Minim that takes the crown of the best one, which is quite funny. Probably because it is still very weak, but is the most tanky of all of them. And then we've got the anti-electrics, these guys. You can also include, like I said, Alolan Marowak, but you can also include Larion here, because that's also a ground. Anything that walls out the electric types is good. So all of those are solid choices there. As we talked about before, though, Nidoking is probably the best choice if you have Fury Cutter, because it gains so much energy. If you don't, Poison Jab Nidoqueen is fantastic, and counter Donphan is a bit of a weird one. I'm sure we can make an entire video on Donphan, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's a really weird Pokemon you want to understand. So we have both metas there, right? Both going on at the same time. Now, where it starts getting very interesting, where it starts getting very complicated, is where the metas kind of join together, right? The interactions between both metas. So first thing that people normally notice is that we've got a lot of Nidos running around.
Ooh.
And that's obviously a good thing for the Nidos because that means that they cover both the Charmers and they cover the Electrics. So that's quite nice. But the bad thing about them is that they both lose to the Waters and they lose to the Umbreon. The main thing that I want you to take away is that the reason that I started with the Umbreon meta is that I personally believe that is the main meta that people want to be focusing on. And the whole reason behind that is that Umbreon can make a lot of other Pokemon feel absolutely useless. So if you're going into a game and you're going in with a Vaporeon meta, so if you go Vaporeon, Minun, and Nidoking, you have no counter to Umbreon. Umbreon will beat all those Pokemon. But if you go the other way around, right, if you go in with Umbreon, Alolan Ninetales, and Marowak, yeah, you still have that counter to all the other stuff over there.
Oh.
See what I mean? Because Umbreon's so powerful. So I personally believe that Umbreon meta is going to be the main defining one. Because Umbreon is just so powerful, and if you don't have a Charmer on your team and they have an Umbreon, it's basically game over. His stats are just so incredible.
So focus more on the Umbreon meta than the Vaporeon meta. If you go Umbreon meta, then they don't have an out for you. But if you go Vaporeon meta, then nothing can counter Umbreon.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right. So it's a big thing. But I mean, just still don't ignore Vaporeon meta, because Vaporeon is a Vaporeon and Bibarel are both fantastic Pokemon, and they are really useful. They just don't beat Umbreon, unfortunately.
Okay. So everything is about Umbreon.
Both Bibarel and Vaporeon both give Umbreon a good run for his money, right? And it's very shield dependent and IV dependent, which is okay. And if they have a last resort Umbreon, 9 times out of 10 it's not going to be good IVs, so that's okay. But yeah, I would focus personally. I'd focus on the Umbreon meta. If an Umbreon or Vaporeon have a Flower Crown, they can't know last resort. Okay, so there you go.
If you see it with a Flower Crown, they don't know it.
Tactics. Give it away. Okay, so make sure you're showing up a Flower Crown. Okay, so that's the main stuff of the meta there. A couple of random little picks that I wanted to talk to you about. So obviously we've got Linoon, right? Linoon's an interesting one. He can be, as you can see there, he can be a good Vaporeon counter. So you might want to use him as part of maybe even a replacement of an Electric. The main reason for that is because he can learn Grass Knot, really good. And he still has fairly good matchups with a lot of the other cast, right? So he still beats Granbull, which is quite nice. He beats Alolan Marowak because of his Shadow Claw, right? Only just with those two, but fairly nice. Maybe even a nice safe swap. Unfortunately, loses to Umbreon as usual, especially because his Shadow Claw is going to be resisted by Umbreon.
Okay, so is it worth swapping out if you're in that matchup?
Yes, definitely worth swapping out because you're not going to do much damage to him at all. So that's quite annoying. I've also put these two in there as well because they kind of serve a very similar role to Linoon, especially Lickitung. Lickitung can learn Lick, right, as his fast move, which is also Ghost, so very similar kind of situation. Linoon is definitely the best one there.
Linoon's got Grass Knot, hasn't he?
Yeah, Lickitung has Power Whip, which is interesting. That's also Grass, so similar kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's quite interesting. But Linoon is definitely the best one to choose. We've also got Pillow another interesting one. So the main thing about it is that it beats Alolan Ninetales, which is really good, because obviously Alolan Ninetales is going to be a big part of the cup, and also walls out the Electrics, because he's ground, so Electrics don't do any damage to him, and he manages to beat a couple of the other extra picks, and absolutely demolishes Skuntank, which is really interesting, and that's one that we're coming on to now. So Skunktank's a really interesting one, right? He's one that I really want to pay attention to, because as you can see here, he only just beats Alolan Ninetales, which is a little bit weird, because I think a lot of people think of him as much more of a poison user, and I was tempted to put him as part of the anti-Charmer meta, but actually because he's both poison and dark, he's taking neutral damage to Charm, and because of that, he only just beats a lot of the Charmers, right? So actually, I wouldn't really consider him an anti-Charmer. However, one thing that I found that's very, very interesting with Skuntank is that if an Umbreon doesn't have Last Resort, you can actually beat an Umbreon with it, which is obviously huge. So non-Last Resort Umbreons can be beaten by Skuntank, and that's because all his moves are dark. Skuntank's resisting that because of his dark typing. Okay, so just moving on to the second part of the video now, which is all going to be about the strategies people can use in the Ferocious Cup. So me and Rav just did a couple games. The first game that we did is we are doing it based on the Umbreon meta. So obviously if you watch the first part of the video, you've got two different types of metas going on at the moment. First one is Umbreon meta. Second one, Vaporeon meta, or Bibarel meta, whatever you want to call it. And then the third and fourth games are just mixed general games and see how we go. Okay, so first game, Rav starting. So this is from Rav's perspective, right? He's going up against me. I've got the Umbreon. He's got the Alolan Raticate. As we said right at the start, this is actually a winning matchup for Rav, mainly because he has the Hyper Fang and I don't have the Last Resort on my Umbreon. So his normal moves are going to be doing neutral damage to me, and I'm going to be doing almost nothing to the Alolan Raticate. We both started our Umbreon, or version of Umbreon, here, because obviously Umbreon is such a strong pick. It's such a fantastic pick. It only gets really hard countered by the charm users, as we've said before. As you can see here, though, one huge issue about this is it is just so boring. It is the most boring matchup you'll ever see in your life. Either Umbreon versus Umbreon, or a lone Raticate versus Umbreon, or a lone Raticate versus lone Raticate. They're just so long-winded. So obviously I've decided to shield one. I'm going to skip it forward a little bit because it's just such a long battle, as you can see here, just going on. And eventually he takes down my Umbreon after multiple Hyper Fangs and multiple foul plays on my end. He managed to win the matchup and wins it the shield advantage as well. So I go straight into my Alolan Ninetales. He's got the switch advantage, so obviously he now knows that he can go into his anti-charmer, right? Like we've talked about the matchups. So Nidoking is considered to be an anti-charmer because his poison typing is resisting all the charm type moves. That is the main reason, really. Obviously, anti-charmer mainly because he's resisting. He's not doing any super effective damage to the Alolan Ninetales, but he is just resisting all that kind of stuff. And of course, I get the defense 4. I'm going to pause it right here. If you had to put money on who would win this match, right? If you went to a bookie, I'd imagine the odds for me winning are pretty low, right? I'm going to put a 10 on me winning this match. So obviously he decides to shield because Psychic is super effective against the Nidoking. And Charm, even being resisted, is still doing a ton of damage because it's just a ridiculous move. But Earth Power, super strong. My defense has fallen. I decide not to shield. I don't think I even have a shield. Do I have a shield? I don't even have a shield. So it's downhill from here. And then I've got my Anti-Charmer, right, which is my Alolan Marowak. And I managed to get to my Bone Club nice and quickly, which is obviously super effective against Nidoking. He decides to shield, and this is really where it starts going downhill for him because he dies without getting to the Earth Power. So now we finished off with a good matchup for me. Alolan Marowak is a fantastic Pokemon against Alolan Ninetales, probably the best one against Alolan Ninetales because he's resisting Charm because he's a Fire type, and he's doing super effective damage back to the Alolan Ninetales. So they're doing probably about the same amount of damage to each other with the fast attacks, but Alolan Marowak's just getting so much more energy. So that is the classic Umbreon meta, right? You've got Umbreon, your Charmer, and your Anti-Charmer. All three happen at the same time, and it works like any other rock, paper, scissors meta. You want to win switch advantage and keep them in the negative matchup. Unfortunately, there you saw that I managed to swap that round there, but that was just through some lucky plays, to be honest. Okay, so going into game 2 here, so this is where we both go with the Vaporeon meta instead. So obviously Vaporeon meta being a water, an electric, and a general ground type, or something that beats the electrics. Obviously Rav starts ground, I start electric, so he wins that starting matchup. I've gone into my version of a ground, right, my anti-electric. Now what's interesting here is that I decided to start Raikou. It's quite an interesting strategy because he builds energy up so quickly, and if he was going up against anything else, it'd be pretty solid. Obviously Vaporeon being a really strong lead, I thought Rav would start Vaporeon there instead. He ends up not doing that, so fair enough to him. He reads me as usual, Rav reading me like a book, and gets obviously the switch advantage. Well, not the switch advantage, but he gets the advantage in the matchup, being able to stay in that good matchup. Obviously, he's continuously forcing to the bad matchups here. That was my main, essentially one hit, trying to go for that, trying to swap the matchup around there, but unfortunately didn't work out. I go into, and now this is the huge part, as you can see here. I say this in the meta video as well. Unfortunately, the electrics, especially anything that's not minim, just don't do the job. Look at that damage. This is meant to be a good matchup for Raikou. Unfortunately, Vaporeon's got a ton of energy, has managed to whack out, and I'm forced to shield there, which is absolutely crazy. So that little extra time that I had where Rav was still switch locked and I managed to go into a Raikou was completely wasted. And one saving grace of Raikou is that he does have Shadow Ball though, so that's quite nice. Neutral damage to a lot of the cast here. As you can see there, it did a ton of damage to the Donphan, but doesn't really matter. At this point, it's basically GG's. He has a Linoon, and like we talked about before, Linoon is a really good anti-Vaporeon. Technically not electric, but is probably one of the nicer ones. And you can see here, this is why, because he has Grass Knot. Right now, Grass Knot is a fantastic move, and actually Linoon has some amazing moveset. You can see there, it does an absolute ton of damage to Vaporeon, and with Shadow Claw, really solid Pokemon to choose. So another thing to talk about there is with the Vaporeon meta, you could forego using an electric, because obviously how weak they are in terms of their HP and their defense, and go for a Linoon instead, which is pretty nice. But obviously when the metas start combining together, that's when it starts getting interesting. So the next two matches are going to be all about that. Okay, and just going into some normal games now. So this is just, I told Rav, right, just pick your three, just do a normal game as if it was a tournament, see how it goes from here. And interestingly, we both went Umbreon meta, as he's listened to what I've said right at the beginning of the video. Umbreon meta is obviously in my opinion, the superior one. And that is simply just because Umbreon is just so strong. He's such a strong Pokemon. And if you do not have a Charm user, you're in some serious trouble. So here I decided to start Umbreon. Again, just hoping that he doesn't start a Charm user and he ends up starting an Anti-Charmer, right? Maybe thinking that I'd start with the Alolan Ninetales instead. Fair enough to him. He ends up going for an Earthquake, really high damaging move, and Umbreon probably the only Pokemon in the game that manages to tank an Earthquake. You never think you'd see it happen. So at this point, I have Overcharge. Another big thing about Umbreon is he gains a lot of energy very quickly, and people are going to have to learn about how much energy he has, because you can see there, Rav used a shield, where he probably shouldn't have, because now I've gone 2 in a row, and he has lost his Pokemon and lost his shield there, right? If it was probably been better for him to just lose the Pokemon straight away if he knew that, or use 2 shields, right? So he goes straight into his Charmer, but as you can see here, the issue is that I have the switch advantage, where I can go in with my Anti-Charmer, and if he decides to swap out, I can then swap into my Charmer, which is exactly what's going to happen here. I fudged the swap a little bit and probably stay in there a little bit longer than expected, but I have an extra shield, so it's not too bad. It's not an issue. And what you're going to start seeing here is the Charm just doing an absolute ton of damage to the Alolan Raticate. The really hard counter to, obviously, look at that, unbelievable amount of damage. So there we go, and at this point, as usual, Alolan Ninetales has done the job with a ton of health remaining. Anything Alolan Ninetales does now is just extra credit. So good old Alolan Ninetales managed to get a shield off Rav and beat the Alolan Raticate, and I still have my Anti-Charmer in the back, so it's basically over at this point, basically. You can't really do a huge amount here. So, a big reason that I chose to do Alolan Marowak as my Anti-Charmer is for this reason, right? You can see here, Alolan Ninetales being the main Charm user of the Cup. Psyshock doesn't do a huge amount of damage. Ice Beam does almost nothing because it's neutral to it, and you're going to be doing super effective damage to that Alolan Ninetales, and it's a really bad situation for Alolan Ninetales. And you could even farm. It's a very farmable matchup as well. So there we go. That's the end of that game. We both happen to go Umbreon meta, just because what I said, he's taking my advice there, Umbreon meta being the main one. So, final game, I do ask that we swap it up a little bit, even though, I mean, my advice is that you kind of stick with Umbreon meta. But there we go, we're going to swap up for the final game. Okay, moving into the final game then. We end up just going proper random here, just trying out as many random Pokemon as we can. Don't want to just do the same 3 Pokemon over and over. So he goes Donphan, I go Linoon. Now this is a weird one. They're both kind of off the meta picks. I don't want to say off meta, but off the 2 types of meta that I've been talking about. But Donphan does beat Linoon, and if you know your Pokemon really well, you'd know why. The fact that obviously he's got counter as his fast attack. Linoon being normal means he's doing super effective damage. So yeah, he's obviously doing a ton of damage there. I end up going for a Dig here, one of the obviously another type, which is actually a pretty high damaging move, and does a ton of damage there. There we go. I want a Grass Knot on my Linoon. Unfortunately, I haven't got enough charge TM, so he's got a Thunder on it at the moment. If you're wondering why I didn't do Grass Knot, that would have been the ideal option. But there we go, end up working out all right anyway. Rav ends up going in with his Charm user because he's obviously worried about my Umbreon, which he knows I'm going to have at some point. But luckily for me, I've brought in my Anti-Charm user that doubles up as the Anti-Electric, the Alolan Marowak. And here is the main match that I really want you to pay attention to, because it's obviously very, very important. This is the reason that I say that the Umbreon meta is more important than the Vaporeon meta, because Umbreon versus Vaporeon is a terrible, terrible matchup for Vaporeon, unfortunately. So he decides to go for an Aqua Tail here, which normally is a pretty solid move. But Umbreon, the tankiest Pokemon of the game, does almost nothing to him, which is absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. So obviously, and my foul plays are doing a lot of damage to the Vaporeon. So I end up forcing a shield out of him. I think I end up forcing 2 shields out of him, if I can remember rightly. There we go. So there you go. So obviously he's switch locked out of his Charm User. He's trying to stay with his... He's just got his switch advantage back. Oh, no, switch advantage. He's just got his switch back now. He has a bit of a mental way of doing the water one, doesn't he? I need to teach him how to do that properly. But as you can see there, it's basically game over. Because Umbreon is just such a tank. And if he can swerve the Charmers, he can just do so much damage. He can just do so much work, and it's just crazy. So there you go. Rav started with energy. I only had 1 shield. He ended up using 2, and I still won the matchup. Even though there's no super effective things going on, right? Nothing like that. It's just the fact that Umbreon's stats are just so good for the Great League PvP in Pokemon Go. It's absolutely crazy. And there we go. It's basically game over, right? Obviously, I'm just doing super effective damage, gaining a ton of energy, and Shadow Ball the heck out of his Alolan Ninetales. And there it is, GG's. So that is the main stuff that you should be looking for when you're looking at the Ferocious meta, right? Obviously, as you can tell from what I've been saying, a big part of it is the Umbreon meta. You want to be focusing on that if you can. Still early days though. I'm still going to be doing more research on the cup. So if I think of anything new, any new strategies, anything new that you want to know about, I'll whack it on Rav's channel and it will be there for you to see.
Okay, cool. So the video is over. Nigel, thank you so much.
No worries.
The presentations were amazing. I want to say what I've learned really quick. All right, so Nigel, I've learned this is what I've learned.
Okay, talk to me.
There is Umbreon meta. And
Umbreon meta.
Is Vaporeon meta.
Vaporeon meta. Babaron meta. Goofy ass. We'll call it Vaporeon meta.
He's actually really good, you know.
Yeah, he's very
I haven't got one ready, but I need one.
I'm not using it.
Umbreon meta is more superior to Vaporeon meta just because Umbreon is a beast and he's a tank.
My opinion.
Yep, that's but taking it on board, and it's good understanding the presentation was good with the triangles as well, understanding obviously what's weak to what, etc.
Good.
But when you mix them together, it's a different game.
Exactly. So that's the basics. That was the first episode of teaching Ravi Ortwell, because that was the basics of the cup. But the real hard part about it is the intricacies between both metas, right? So that's what we're going to be working on in future. That's what we're going to practice around. That's how we're going to win. Yeah.
It's a bit different to previous cups.
Exactly.
Like, you just normally learn one matchup or a few, but this one's like quite a lot of combinations. So yeah, it's looking interesting. Still need more practice. PvP videos, we should be bringing them once a week. And Halloween video will be with you Thursday. Okay, so it's the longest I've left the video, but that'll be with you Thursday. Okay, so nice, thank you again. And we hope to catch you on the next episode. Have a great day. Ciao.